Welcome to issue 1 of the Betsy Braddock newest comic. Now just to provide you a small recap of Captain Britain's story after the events of Excalibur and Knights of X. We have her story ending with Betsy choosing to stay behind for months to defend Otherworld from the anti-mutant crusader Merlin. But after that was done, Betsy Braddock left the provinces to govern themselves, divorcing the role of Captain Britain from its traditional place by the side of the omniversal Majestrix. So because of that, she stayed as the defender of Otherworld to protect them from all outside threats, basically replacing the Starlight Citadel and watching over all the universes that connect to Otherworld, which includes defending the multiverse too. So with that said, she was also able to make a few allies along the way, which includes the Captain Britain Corps and Pete Wisdom as the leader of Strike, Psi Division, Captain Avalon, which is her brother Brain Braddock, and his powerful fairy wife Megan Braddock. But with Britain itself not too keen on Betsy as its captain, she's got a long road ahead. So with that out the way, this issue opens with Betsy having a conversation on the news station. And let's just say that this conversation was looking more like an inquisition than anything else. Because like I stated earlier, the British people isn't too keen on Betsy being their newest captain. In fact, they are actually questioning why she even has the title to begin with. Mainly because of the fact that she is a mutant. Because as we all know, their country was one of the nations that didn't accept Krakoa as a country. Which is ironic because the person who was debating with her was a mutant himself that went by the name Micromax. And much like the moderator, he was dead set on bringing her down. So after wave upon wave of demoralizing questions, our captain receives a psychic message from out in the multiverse calling for help, which made her cut this interview short. And the person in question that needed help wasn't really a person in the traditional sense. Because the call for help came from Earth 99476 from Britannica Rex, which so happened to be a planet made up of dinosaurs. And unfortunately, our dinosaur Captain Britain is in grave danger because her world is currently facing an issue that was long foreseen to happen in their future. Britannica Rex spoke of the day when fire would rain down from the heavens and destroy their world, when their planet would be bombarded by meteors. And unfortunately for her, that day is today. But when you're a member of the Captain Britain Corps, help is never too far away. Because out of the sky we see Betsy Braddock and Rachel Summers ascend from the sky. So with help on the scene, the two captains immediately made their way to an impact crater as Rachel helped escort the many dinosaur tribes to safety. But once our two Betsy's made it to the impact site, they was shocked by what they found. Because in the crater was a Fury. And strangely enough, this Fury was much smaller than the ones they faced in Otherworld. But just because it was smaller didn't mean it was least deadly. Because as soon as Britannica Rex got close to it, the Fury sprung into action. And just like that, the battle was on. And while they was fighting the Fury, the two Betses was trying to figure out the purpose of this invasion. Because Britannica stated that her world is not one of technology, so the Fury really should have no purpose here. And that's when our Betsy let her know that their whole purpose is to attack those with superpowers and to kill members of the Captain Britain Corps. So as the fight wages on, Betsy states that they would need a lot of power in order to bring this Fury down, which was exactly what they had, because from up above came Rachel Summers, and she was primed and ready to put in some work. So using some power from the Phoenix Force, Rachel launched a ball of fire into the tar pit surrounding the Fury, causing it to go up in flames. And just like that, the battle was over for now, because afterward we transition over to the Braddock's base of operations, where we see Betsy, Rachel, and Brian having a conversation about the events that just transpired. Because once everything was set and done, the team started to do intense research on the Furies. And from what they could gather, they discovered that the Furies, while under Merlin rule, chose to enlarge themselves to resemble Sentinels. But once they did that, they ended up growing weaker in the process. So due to the fact that this one was in its original form, made it much more powerful than when they faced them back in Otherworld. In fact, Rachel points out that she even tried to do chronoskimming to track down the Fury's origins, only to discover that they aren't even from Earth 238 like the ones they faced before. So while they was continuing on with their conversation, it was mysteriously interrupted by a massive shake of their house. Because outside of the house, Jamie Braddock was transporting the home in his hands, as he went skipping along the Braddock Isle off the coast of England, until he ran into some not so happy British soldiers with their guns drawn. But little did they know that Jamie was more than they bargained for, because in a split second, Jamie tossed the home in their direction, and in a blink of an eye, the Braddock home grew to its original size. And just like that, Jamie was able to return his entire family to their home of origins. But unlike the rest of the family, Betsy and Rachel still had some work to do. Because as their house was beginning surrounded by cameras, the two women made their way into the courtyard where they shared a passionate kiss before teleporting to Otherworld to meet with the Fury King. So while all that is going on, we skip over to Micromax having a conversation with someone, and by the looks of it he is currently in the hot seat. Because the person he is speaking to is none other than Morgan Le Fay, and she has no love for the witch breed, or better known as mutants. But by the time Micromax realized it, it was already too late. Because his escape was cut short when Morgan scooped him up. Because this whole situation was orchestrated by Morgan Le Fay the whole time. Everything that happened from the interview to all the hate the Braddocks was receiving was because of her. Because her ultimate goal was to make Britain in her own image. But in order to do that, she must first crown her own Captain Britain. A Captain Britain that wears the Union Jack and smiles for the camera. A Captain Britain that makes people happy. A Captain Britain that is easy to control. And with those ominous words, we transfer over to Infuri, or better known as the land of the Everforge and the homeworld of the Furies. And when we get to this cold mechanical world, we see Betsy Braddock and Rachel approach a throne where the Lord of all Furies sat waiting. Now this is a very important moment for both sides, because this is the very first time they spoke since the Furies sided with Merlin during the war. And with Betsy being who she is, she made it a point to ask the Forge Master Federal if he had anything to say about that. In which he responds by making light of it by saying, no, because Merlin lost the war, which solicited laughter from his people. Now, with Betsy trying to be diplomatic about the situation, she chose to ignore the insult and bring up the purpose of her being there, which was because of the fury they fought earlier. But once again the king continued to insult her by saying that it sounds like Captain Britain lost a battle and learned a lesson. Now this pissed Betsy off, because she shot back by saying, you have made it clear that you are not my charges and you don't want my protection, which means you can easily become my enemies. So while all that chaos is going on, we skip away from the throne room and see Rachel sneaking around gathering information. And while she doing that, we could hear the verbal battle between Betsy and the Forge Master play out. Because the Forge Master states that those Furies didn't act on his orders. But just because he didn't order it doesn't mean he is against it. Because he encourages people to fight, and if Captain Britain wants to waste her time by tracking them down, then she is more than welcome to try. But as soon as he states that Rachel gets discovered by the Furies, but not before Rachel comes across a giant Union Jack hanging in the forge. So with tensions high, Betsy rushes to Rachel's side saying if anyone lays a single finger on her, then that would be seen as an act of war, which was all she needed to say to buy them enough time to escape. Because the Forge Master ordered his Furies to stand down, because it wasn't worth a what against Krakoa, and on top of that they had their own orders to follow. So while that is going on, we jump over to the Isles, and we see Pete Wisdom, the leader of Strike, paying a visit to the Braddocks. At first, he just sat down with Brian and had a regular conversation while drinking tea, until our two heroes returned from the forge. Because once they arrived, she wasted no time and immediately got down to business. Betsy filled Pete in on everything that went down, including the collaboration between the Furies and Earth 616 English government. But despite all that information, she still needed Strike to fill in some information for her, which led her to ask Pete to look into the Coven, because she suspected them to be the ones dealing directly with the Forge. So being a good ally, Pete agrees to Betsy's favor, but under the stipulations that he could start work tomorrow, due to the fact that they all was tired. So following that, we transition to later that night where Betsy and Rachel was preparing for bed while having a full conversation about the events that just transpired, talking about things like future plans and logistics on how to gather additional information, until Rachel suggests that maybe just for tonight they could focus on each other and deal with everything in the morning. So as the two push all their complaints to the back of their head, they then turn their attention to the then and now. So skipping over to the following morning, we pick up with Pete meeting with his team at a local cafe. And some of the main takeaways from their meeting was that Kevin Mulhern aka Dr. Destiny is among their roster, and, more importantly, they have also been keeping Excalibur under their care to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. Mainly the British government, who is currently working with the Forge and the Coven. So with that said, we jump over to just that, the Coven, which is being led by Morgan Le Fay. And when we see her, she is spying on another member of the Captain Britain Corps as she is being attacked by a Fury. And while she is looking on, she makes note of saying that she is looking for members of the Corps that can be easily brought to heel or easily turned against their sisters. But see, this attack didn't go unnoticed by our Betsy, because in the dead of sleep she awoke and sprung into action, as her and Rachel once again arrived on the scene. But when they get there, they are shocked to discover that the fury that is attacking this world is here to offer Captain Brittany a chance to join their side, by saying, in exchange of her services, they will spare her world, and that she will no longer have to serve under a false Captain Britain, which Captain Brittany quickly turns down the offer and begun to laugh in its face. But unfortunately, the Furies don't take rejection easily, because within moments several more Furies arrived on the battlefield. So with the odds stacked against them, Rachel let out a ball of energy that quickly faded away as she went crashing to the ground. But see, that little blast of energy was all she needed to summon the full might of the Captain Britain Corps, because several members arrive in all their glory and quickly lay waste to the few Furies on the scene, only to be once again met by additional reinforcements, but this time Morgan was among them. So as she exits the portal, she let Betsy know that it was convenient for her to summon most of her forces in one area, so she could deal with them all at once. And that wasn't all, because she also revealed that not all Betses should be trusted, as we see a former member of the Corps walking out from the shadows. So with that said, this issue comes to an end.